Hi guys, welcome back to episode 16 of the Gen Z podcast with me, Danica Tamsin. So once again, it is just me in the studio today. I've got Mark mic'd up at the back. Mark, say hi.
Hi.
Just because I know there's a few topics that I definitely just want to hear some of his one-liners on there. So yeah, I'm going to just explain like the new setup with the podcast. So I've decided that having a new guest every week isn't really the best for the show. So I've decided to have a guest on once a month. Mark has kindly agreed to be on once a month as well. And then the other 2 episodes, you'll just have me and my beautiful self on this week's show. And on the show, sorry, but I think it's just a better way to run it just completely, because you have to get used to new people and it's kind of hard, and I want you like to see my personality more because it is Danica Tamsin's channel. So yeah, also I'm wearing glasses because I've got puffy eyes at the moment. I've had a few problems this week with my eyes, so I cannot wear eye makeup, and I just don't love the way that I look without eye makeup. So yeah, enough of me blabbling on. Let's get into this week's topics. So I'm going to start off with Joe Budden. So if you that don't know who Joe Budden is a rapper, a retired rapper, but he's really made it big in the podcast and content creating space. He's got his podcast, the Joe Budden podcast. He used to do Everyday Struggle on Complex with DJ Academics. He's appeared on Love and Hip Hop with 2 of his girlfriends, Tahiri and Sin Santana. He's basically just a massive American personality. So the past few weeks he's had a lot of drama with his co-host. So I'm just going to start it all the way from the start because I'm very aware that some of you don't know who Joe Budden is. So on the podcast he's got 2 co-hosts. He's got Rory and Mal. So when the podcast first started, I believe he was with his assistant and just a producer. Then he was doing the podcast and he realised that he didn't really like the dynamic with his assistant. So he said, you know what, don't come back on anymore. So during that phase, he found his best friend, who was Mal at the time, and a guy called Rory to be his co-hosts. So that's just a little background on how they got onto the show. So now Joe Budden, he carries the show great on his own. However, these 2 guests 2 co-hosts, really skyrocketed the show. The show just went huge. They signed with Spotify for like a major deal, a lot of millions. I would arguably say they're one of the top 10 podcasts in the world. Would you say that, Mark?
They're ranked up there, but I wouldn't say the content's top 10.
I'll explain why I like it later, but they've got a lot. They're doing numbers, so they're doing quite well. So I'm a regular listener to the Joe Budden podcast, and I noticed a couple of months ago just the vibe was off between all 3 of them. Like one just kept on snapping. He seemed like he wasn't taking the banter very well, and my intuition was right because they had a little bit of a tiff behind the scenes. So Joe Budden decided to say, look, don't come back until you better, because clearly there's something wrong with you. So then the other co-host stood up and he said, well, how are you telling him to take a break? Like this isn't his main job as well. I don't agree with that. I agree that we all should take a break and then come back better. So between them 6 weeks, they were having a little bit of back and forths behind the scenes, and Joe Budden just got 2 new co-hosts. And the show was doing quite well. Like I expected not people to tune in. Oh, that did not make sense. I expected people just not to tune in to the Joe Budden podcast after that, because Rory and Mal are major parts of it. However, the chemistry was actually okay. So they came back after a little conversation. The first episode back, I arguably could say that I didn't find it that awkward. Like, Mark, did you listen to it at all?
I listened to the one when he fired them. I don't listen to every time I've listened to the podcast, I've had to turn it off because I feel like there's too much. It don't stay on one topic. They branch off too much, and there's a lot of laughing. And don't get me wrong, I got humor, but certain topics I tune in to hear about that topic. And on that podcast, I feel like they don't stick to the topics, but I do appreciate that it's loved by hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people.
Do you know what though? And I sometimes tell you this about your show. I actually really enjoy free flow conversation. Like, I really love when people are just talking and I feel like I'm in the background. So that's why I enjoy the Joe Budden podcast, because it just seemed like friends just having a conversation and I was listening in on it. Like, when it comes to like me wanting to hear good breakdowns, I know there's shows that I can go to. Like, I know Mark will break it down from every angle, the Express Truth, pick up them. And then I know, like, so I go to podcasts for different reasons. So I enjoy Joe Budden as simple background noise. So the fact that, you see, I went on this tangent and I forgot where I...
You were speaking about the first episode back.
Oh yeah, so the first episode back, I noticed that it wasn't that awkward, considering that they had like a little bit of a tiff. So then they had another episode called Clearing the Air, and this is where it got awkward, because they're clearing the air, but whatever, Mar was basically asking for respect from Joe, and Joe couldn't see it at all. So now, I believe what's happened, they came to do an episode after they'd done a vacation, and Rory and Mal didn't show up. So that's where the viral clips came from. The viral clip is Joe Budden screaming and saying, Rory, you're fired, you're in breach of your contract, don't come back, you're not welcome back. And he's just going crazy. So now, I look at this from all different angles when I think about friendships. I always believe respect is the basic principle of all friendships. So I find that if you all respect each other, when it comes to money and when it comes to business, everything should go hand in hand, because there's a basic principle of respect. What I've seen now is Joe Budden is making out like this is all over money, but I actually listened to the whole podcast where Mal repeated over and over again that it's not about money for him, but Joe Budden's constantly making it about money. So I'll list reasons why I believe Joe Budden's in the right. I actually really like Joe Budden. I've been watching Joe Budden for years. I've got this thing for like awkward people, because I think, I don't know, I just like people who are just not normal. So if you watch him on Love and Hip Hop, you can tell that he's quite awkward. He don't really know how to speak to people properly. He don't really understand how to argue properly. It's actually quite entertaining. So because of this, I just was drawn to him. Then another big reason why I like Joe Budden, do you remember Taxstone, Mark?
Yeah.
Joe Budden had an argument with Taxstone, and honestly, if you have a free 5 minutes, watch the argument. Oh my gosh. Taxstone is getting so angry, and Joe Budden's just there, really calm. So from that moment there, I said, this man I like him on camera, but I doubt I could be a friend with him, because he seems like he's impossible to get through to. So then, when you go into business, I believe that it should be clear where everybody stands. There should be no blurred lines on where people stand. When it comes to podcasts, you don't receive the content, you receive what gets uploaded to YouTube or on the streaming platform. Podcasts are hard to create. In this room alone, Mark could tell you there's thousands of pounds worth of equipment that it takes for somebody to build it up. So I believe the person who builds it up should have some form of responsibility. Another thing that I agree with Joe on is that if Joe doesn't do the show, there's no show. If Joe decides to take weeks off because he's angry, there's no show going on. But these can be disposable. Once again, I listen to the show a lot. I see Mal is always on his phone. He's chilling. He really treats it like a job. So I understand why Joe Budden will act like it's a job, because when he goes, he treats it like it's a job. You can see that Joe Budden has put his whole life into this. When you hear him talk about the Spotify deal, the Patreon deal, he sounds so passionate, but these guys are in the background like, oh, wow, that's Joe's business, and we'll get down to it. I'm not going to say, when I started this podcast, I really wanted to have a co-host. I really wanted a co-host, but it's really hard to find a balance. And this is what I really struggle with about girls, really. Like, I find that with men, there's like a common ground. Well, I thought there was, but then look at Joe Budden. There's like a common ground, like you all respect each other, and that's how business moves forward. But I believe that with women, it can be a little bit more catty, like, wow, why has she not done this? Why is her name before my name? Why is this? Why is that? And nobody really can take the alpha role in the podcasting. So I believe that is a little bit harder for women. But anyway, I digress. Another reason why Joe's correct in this situation, if somebody is going, he's paying for the equipment, he's paying for the studio sessions, he started the podcast. The first episode is Joe. That's his podcast. Don't now require all of these big contracts and, oh, I need to see all of it, because realistically that is Joe's business. Now, where Joe's wrong, he should have made it extremely clear that I'm the owner and you lot are the workers. I don't believe that he made it that clear, because if he did, he wouldn't be in this situation right now. There's no way that somebody should feel so entitled, in the word of Joe Budden, to your company if you made them feel like that. Like, clearly Joe said, look, Rory, you're my partner, you know what I mean? So he expects that. Joe is always talking about these $1 million deals. You know, this man's messing with millions, yeah. So his friends, well, Joe and Rory, Marl and Rory just sit in the back and they don't say anything. And you have to sit and be like, why are they not saying anything? Because they're really not involved in the business part of it. When it comes to friends and business, it's such a hard thing to mix. And that's why I believe podcasts are so hard as well, because podcasts is just free-flowing conversation. You're just sitting down and you're talking. If you're not talking to your podcast host, co-host, how are you going to do a decent podcast? It's not going to work. People are going to pick up on the energy. Like, it's not like radio. So if you like listen to Breakfast Club, Angela Yee and Charlemagne clearly wasn't talking for a couple of months, but they're only really doing little 10-minute, 5-minute segments here, there and everywhere. They don't need to be bouncing off each other as much. Also, there's a third person. But when you're doing a podcast, you have to bounce off each other's energy. Somebody can't come in sour face and expect the other person to carry the show, because you're ruining the other person's energy. So on their side, I understand that why they wouldn't want to go back and do the show. Because, for example, me and Mark don't argue, but if I was arguing with Mark, I would struggle to really be my true self in front of this camera, because I know that Mark's behind the camera, and that's not even him talking. That's him just watching. So, yeah, I do understand why they may not have wanted to record during that time. Now, shall I tell you something that bothers me about people underneath comments? All I ever hear underneath comments is, make sure you read contracts. Everybody, you must read a contract, because these label executives and this industry really F's you over, all of that. So I know a lot of you that don't even read your terms and conditions on your phone. Why are you blaming people for missing a little line in the contract? The thing is, I genuinely believe nobody in that industry is in the favour of you. Only you are in favour of you. So if I ever make it that big, well, in Jesus' name, I'll make it that big, I will have to learn all of this law lingo and all the lingo that they use.
Not necessarily.
I would.
I gotta jump in now.
Why?
So I've been listening, and you've made a lot of good points about Joe Budden's podcast, yeah? But you need to understand that, first and foremost, let me talk about the contractual stuff. Rory and Mal would be given their contracts, yeah? It's not up to you to read the contract. That's not your job. You're not a lawyer. Contract. So when you're buying a house, yeah, you sign about 7 pieces of documentation. Them documentations, some of them are very thick, but I can tell you I didn't even read a paragraph on it. You know why? Because the solicitor's job is to do that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So I'm meant to say to the solicitor, I'm going to let you get back in. I'm meant to say to the solicitor, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. He's meant to know, he's meant to look at things, in their case, the lawyer, is meant to look at the things that they don't want. He's meant to look at the things that are bad for them. You're meant to tell your lawyer what you want. Now, the things that you don't want, the lawyer is now meant to go back to the company and say, look, my client wants A, B, C. Now, if you say yes, it comes back another contract for you to sign. So it ain't up to Rory and Mal. They're not going to know exactly what's in it. But on the topic of the Joe Budden podcast, remember that he'll sit down on episodes and say, Spotify, they're not paying me, and I'm meant to get this amount of money and this, that, and the third. You're turning down deals and you're not even speaking to your co-host. Deals that everyone else can see are very good. The rumored deal was 30 million for 5 years. That's 6 million a year to talk for maximum 4 or 5 hours a week. Yeah. Now, are you telling me that's a bad deal?
Wow. I believe that if you listen to the crowd, do you know about Joe Budden?
I know that everywhere he goes, it don't last long.
Yeah. So Joe Budden, everywhere he goes, it doesn't last long. His departure with Def Jam, I believe, when he left Everyday Struggle.
Slaughterhouse.
Everything, it always ends in drama with him. So, right, let me go back to the contract thing.
Yeah, go on.
Now, I never like to walk blindly into situations, and from the story I told you about my university accommodation, I've learned to understand contracts, because you have to, because you know the lawyer, there's some things that they might not feel passionate about. They might not be thinking about the worst case scenarios. Good lawyers will be, but not everybody has a good lawyer. So you should be able to look through your contract and see what everything means and and try and understand everything. There's a part in that contract that says that if they depart the Joe Budden podcast, they can't do another podcast for a year after. That might not sound like a big deal, but when the flame goes and the buzz goes, who's really checking for Rory and Mal? Nobody's going to be really checking.
But the yes
them.
man, Danica, that's the problem again. With a podcast, what are you 4 months into this now?
Feb, yeah.
All right, so you're 4 months into this, yeah? A podcast is about opinions that people want to tune into. So people will tune in to the Joe Budden podcast mainly to listen to Joe Budden. Every time I've listened to that podcast, yeah, those guys are just yes men. They just agree with everything he says. That's not good for listening. Like, these guys are not what they think they are. However, I credit them for helping build up the platform, and they deserve to be treated fairly for helping to build up the platform, because truth be told, before Everyday Struggle, no one went checking for the Joe Budden podcast. Not like there was after Everyday Struggle.
So basically, before I even started, I didn't listen to no UK podcasts. I used to listen to Taxstone. I used to listen to Combat Jack, rest in peace. I used to listen to Joe Budden. I used to listen to The Read, Brilliant Idiot, just bare American podcasts, yeah. So, in that podcast world, Joe Budden was huge. Joe Budden has a cult-like following. So, the numbers might not have been masses. So, somebody couldn't just be like, oh, let me occasionally listen to Joe Budden podcast. Often you found people either heard every last episode for those 437 he's got out, or they haven't heard any. There's no really in between. So he had a really good cult-like following. So with the co-host, with such a big personality like Joe Budden, it's okay to have yes men around you, because he needed them just to drive the conversation a little bit forward. But did you listen to how long was it? 2 hours? The rant, the last?
No, I listened to the first 50 minutes, but that's all I could find.
So, yeah, it was hard to find. If anybody can find it, let me know. But, what do you call it? Joe Budden can hold a podcast on his own. He can hold a podcast on his own. That's the truth.
Danica, it's not about that. What you have to remember is a podcast, talking podcast anyway, yeah? Because the podcast is a genre. But conversational podcasts are not for one person, unless it's like a tutorial or a movie review or commentary. You know what I mean? Commentary, yes, 2 people is always better, but commentary is usually if Joe Budden felt comfortable doing it on his own, that's how he should have did it. You don't bring guys in and then belittle them.
This is my issue. So this is another point I did want to make. Joe Budden and Mal have been friends for years. Do you know who Mal is?
Yeah, Mal's the black one, innit?
Yeah, so he's, you know, Biggs Burke.
Yeah, Biggs from Rockefeller.
Dash,
Yeah.
Jay-Z. So that's his little brother, yeah.
Oh.
So Mal's been in the industry for years. Like, he's just behind the scenes.
See, I didn't even know that.
Like, he's got pictures with Jay-Z back in the day. Like, he's around people like that. So people like undermine Mal. Not saying that he was successful in his own right, because he wasn't, but he has a lot of leeway because he's got a lot of connections within the industry. So I don't like that people like really try and minimize Mal, like, oh, he's only somebody because of Joe, because this was really just a hobby for Mal, because he really could have just stayed chilling.
That's the problem,
hanging around. But that's what I was going to say. You cannot give nobody else the right of your career. Somebody can't be in a bad mood and end my career. That's the power they gave Joe. Joe literally said one day, look, Rory, don't come back. That's realistically the end of Rory's talking career, because in the contract.
Yeah, but
can't give nobody that power.
Again, when you build popularity in the podcast world, really you should be saying to yourself, you got to be doing multiple things.
You do.
So you need to be active on social media. You need to be active on YouTube. You need to be going on different people's platforms to build yourself up. So, for conversation's sake, if you look at Charlemagne,
I was going to say
he does Breakfast Club, but then he's got Brilliant Idiots, this, that. You look at Envy, the podcasting. You got to have
But
go on.
Let me tell you from a different side of that. Guys, I'm going to be referring to a lot of Americans this episode. So if you look at Charlemagne the God, he brought in Andrew Schultz to do the podcast with him. Yeah. Now, Andrew Schultz could have sat there and lived in Charlemagne's shadow and be like, oh, that's Charlemagne's co-host on Brilliant Idiots. But no, Andrew Schultz decided to really use that platform and then push his career further. Now, I don't really listen to Andrew Schultz outside of the Brilliant Idiots, but I know that Andrew Schultz is very successful in his own right, with or without Charlemagne, and he used the leeway that he got from Brilliant Idiots to further his career. Now look at Lip Service. Lip Service, I think, to be fair, I don't really listen to Lip Service, so I couldn't tell you who's on there now, but there was a woman called L'Oreal. Yeah, L'Oreal was on there with Angela Yee. L'Oreal was like, okay, cool, I'm living in Angela Yee's shadow. Let me push my career forward, use that to get a radio show, get my own podcast. Now she's interviewing some of the biggest artists in the world because of what she was given. Do you know what I mean? The issue where Rory and Mal went wrong is they didn't do nothing but outside Joe Budden podcast. How can you want leeway? And Joe Budden provided them a platform, a big name. They're these big people now because of Joe Budden. They should have used that to further their own career. So if Joe Budden said and went on some Joe Budden nonsense like he usually does, they can say, well, you stay over there, let me build on my thing over here. But they didn't do that.
They know what it's about though. They knew what it was about and still allowed it to happen. Now, as far as everyone talking about the equipment, because I even said it on Patreon, Joe Budden don't own equipment. He pays contractors who do filming.
But who's paying them?
Yes, but the platform, that's like you go to work in New Look, and then New Look, you're going there getting your wages, yeah? But then someone saying, oh, well, who's paying for the rent here? No, your job is a host. Now, when we decide to start podcasts, for the millions of people that will be starting podcasts, yeah, if you're not willing to fork out from your pocket, yeah, you might as well quit. So Joe Budden, it was his baby, it was his idea. So you're the one where the burden's stuck with you. Now, if you look at Express Truth, yes, I was the one who started it. But when Stephen come on board, Stephen he's got just as much responsibility as me because he's made that happen for himself. he's owned that position. You see what I mean? So like with you, if you get a co-host now who comes onto onto your podcast and says, look, you know, Danica, I want to build this with you. So that now means instead of you buying a mic for £200, when you need a new mic, you both put £100 in. That individual there is entitled to equity.
They're not entitled to 50%, no.
No. It shouldn't be 50%. That's where you discuss the splits.
Yeah, so I feel like they are entitled to equity. So this is where I was saying earlier that the discussion wasn't had, that you're actually workers for me, you're not partners with me. So that's where Joe Budden went wrong. But like, I think it's so difficult with podcasts because I'm a little bit emotional, so I can understand that. When it comes to me, yeah, this podcast here, the Gen Z podcast, is really my heart. Like, this is everything to me. I love it, and I'm going to be doing it for as long as I can, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because you treat it like a hobby.
Exactly. This is me. Do you know what I mean? So I understand where Joe Budden's frustration comes from, that somebody asked to come in, they asked to be treated as such, but they ain't putting in as much effort into it. Like Joe Budden, from my understanding, he's done that. He's studied the industry. He's really tried his hardest to make it a better place for all three of them. Now, all they do is show up. That's all they do. So you're right, they deserve more. But I do understand on Joe Budden's side, it's like, this is me. This is what I've really put my whole life into. And use like, come in, treat it like a job, and then have the cheek to ask for equity. Like, as I said, they can sit down and say, do you know what? I'm not coming in because such and such. If Joe Budden don't come in, there's no show.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, you know, but I'm just saying you have to treat people. You got to know how to go about things as well.
Good.
So what that means is it's very hard, and I understand it's very hard, man, because it's hard to keep people happy. But if it was a friendship, you have to discuss. And really, if you see that they're not trying to level up, you need to talk to them.
But he said he did. He said to Mal that make your own clothesline because you're good at clothing. Yeah. Mal, till this day, didn't do it. He said the same thing to Rory. You handle this side, and in this side of the business, you'll control that, and we'll work as partners. So I control the main podcast, but say if Mal comes out with a clothing line, they'll go into partnerships, and that's Mal's. Rory creates something else. For example, if Rory controlled the event side of things, that's his. Do you know what I mean? Mm. But they decided not to do that. You can't get comfortable in somebody else's shadow. But I think, you know what, sometimes I believe that
you can't say that, Danica, because all of us, look, there's been times where I've been the Michael Jordan of certain situations, but then I'm the Scottie Pippen in other situations. I'm saying we have to understand not everyone's going to be the main thing. There's nothing wrong with being a wingman.
This is where I was going to say where I'm wrong. So I do believe that I sometimes suffer with main character syndrome. Like, I really believe that, like, the world revolves around I, and it's all about for the betterment of me. It's a bad trait. It is a bad trait. However,
the toxic trait.
It is a toxic trait, but the world does revolve. No, I'm joking. So, but I mean in the sense of, like, I don't think I could, if I was in your shadow, and low-key I am following behind you.
I mean, you're inspired, but I've been inspired by, no, I'm saying you're inspired, which is not a bad thing. I'm inspired by things. Like, something inspired me, although when I started podcasting, there was nobody to look up to.
But shall I give you an example of what I'm saying?
Go on.
So, for example, I've got www.danicatamsin.com. Everybody check it out when you're ready. All the content I create there is there. Anyway, so it's because what if one day YouTube decides to shut down? I know I've still got something, and I know that's a wild thing. Like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. But it's just something that I've got something in me that I can't depend on nobody. You can't depend, because people will people. People fall out. People have issues. Companies look at MySpace. So I believe that you should always have your own in something. Yeah, when you go into situations, you should always try and own something so you have leverage. Yeah. Some people go in there just blindsided, not reading contracts properly, agreeing to work with your friend, and then they get effed over like Marl and Rory did.
Yeah.
You can't move in life like that. You sometimes have to say, look, if Joe Budden's head takes him, like his head took him, can I still be there?
Yeah, I mean, Joe Budden's a toxic person, Danica. And what you have to remember is, just look at the situations that he's been in. Slaughterhouse, Eminem threw him a bone. This guy's got more lives than a cat. Eminem threw him a bone with Slaughterhouse, mashed that up. So remember, you can be, if Eminem brings you in on something, if Eminem said to me, look, I want you to be the guy who takes my Instagram photos, that's a career. Because Eminem's going to be in every corner of the world. He's going to have work until the day he dies.
But then look what you have. You've got the talent now to take Instagram photos. So you can use that talent and take it to end because Eminem paid you that money.
But
when you're just talking, anybody can do that.
No. Not
especially when you're a yes man.
Not
you
at
need
all.
to find another
Joe
Joe to follow.
Though, because
Sorry.
Eminem he threw Joe Budden a lifeline when he didn't have to, yeah. That situation got mashed up. Then Joe Budden he got brought into the podcast world as far as mentoring. Everyone needs a mentor, and I didn't have that. So all the equipment and learning what cameras and learning what computers and learning what programs and learning what plugins and learning about tagging videos and learning about thumbnails and every single thing, I've had to work it out myself. Joe Budden's been lucky enough to have mentors. Every single one of his mentors he falls out with. So he had Peter Rosenberg, who at the time was doing WWE's podcasting. He let him use a studio for free for 1 year. He fell out with him. His first co-host, he falls out with her. Everyday Struggle, he falls out with Complex, which is, in New York, that's a no-no. Because Complex are huge. You go on to... You was on Everyday Struggle moaning about Spotify, moaning that Spotify they weren't cutting you in on the Spotify deal. You get your own Spotify deal, that goes wrong. Now your podcast, that goes wrong. There's a common denominator here, and what that is that Joe Budden is a toxic person.
Okay.
Let's just keep it real. No, he's a toxic person, Danica, and I would never embarrass my friends like that.
Yeah.
Like, you know what it is? Me and Steven, 90% of the time, we're cool. There's not an issue. There's no issue. But 10% of the time, we can disagree on things. Nothing that's, he might want to do something I don't want to do. I might want to do something he don't want to do. But you know what? The friendship won't allow that to ever go, to ever create any issues like what's going on with them. You see what I'm saying? Because the respect's there, the loyalty's there. A friendship is not just someone who you associate with. Friends, there is many different ingredients that go into a friendship, and I've just named two: loyalty and respect. And with them things, this problem wouldn't be public.
You're right. So that's where Joe Budden's gone wrong again. And something I do want to mention is that sometimes I hear a lot of men talking about how you've got to be like a horrible person to become successful. Like you have to make horrible decisions, to like treat people bad to get into good places. Now, as much as that might be correct, like millionaires maybe a-holes and all of this, you're not gonna have a good life. It's not good to mess people over. It's not good to do people wrong. It's not a good trait, and you're gonna get your comeuppance in some form. Like, one thing I want to stress to people, and I've said this on podcasts many of times, money doesn't measure success to me. Some of the biggest millionaires you see, they can't hold their wives. Look at Bill Gates just divorced is it Bill Gates?
Yeah,
Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos. Money don't keep nobody. They're still going to bed alone. They're meant to be hugging their dollar bills. No, they're still going to have issues in life. So treating people wrong, when you're going to get to that old age and when you want people around you, you know what? A lot of people won't want to be around Joe Budden because the next people who work with him, they're going to keep him at arm's length because now he's showed over and over again that people are disposable to him. So, like, Joe Budden has not showed loyalty in no situation, full stop.
And that's this is the issue that I have with him. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's got to be people that you keep. There's got to be people that you understand that, look, the respect can never go. No matter if money comes, no matter whatever comes, you need to know there's a level of respect for that person. And they help build that platform. Now, like I said, you're doing podcasts now. I do podcasts. So we got 2 podcasters in our family. Imagine if we ever reach that level of success. Do you think we're going to want to go back? So, if it means that you've got to negotiate, sometimes you've got to sit back at the negotiation table when someone's worth, like I said, like this week, what we've been sitting down we're about to sit down at a table for potential sponsorship from a big company. Now, the first thing that's been said to me is, look, you get given monetary or whatever it is based off of your numbers. I know my numbers ain't off the Richter scale, so I can't go there sitting down demanding A, B, or C. So that's what I'm saying about Rory and Mal. They can't demand things, but I think that they have proved their worth in the sense of the actual podcast, they're valuable. Spotify was giving 30 million because of the podcast. The Spotify weren't giving 30 million because of one man, Joe Budden, because it was because of the podcast. So I'm saying if they're giving me 30 million, the number one person who needs to be taken care of is the production team. So I'm sitting down with the production team and saying, what will it cost me to make sure what will I have to pay you to make sure that I don't have to worry about production? I'm sorting them out. You know who's next after them? My co-hosts.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, all right, this is what's come in. There's a lot of overhead, so we have to take that into account. But I think you're worth this. Now, if they turn around and say, nah, I'm not happy with that, you discuss it at the table. When you don't discuss it, problems like this happen. Yeah, especially when you're somebody who, talking about Joe Budden, who's constantly going on about how people ain't getting paid their worth, all of this stuff. When he was at Everyday Struggle, Complex said the same thing. You don't buy no cameras. You don't pay no production staff, but yet you want ownership. So now he's saying the same thing to his co-host.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? You're doing the same thing.
The thing is, business people often do just put themselves first. They put themselves first and that's how they treat it. But I just think that if you treat people right, people treat you right back. I don't know what the division with the money situation is, and I definitely believe this is just with the co-host, not mentioning the production team. If it was a 60-20-20 split, I couldn't be mad at that. I think that Joe Budden's definitely worth a lot, and he's shown that some of his decisions have been correct. Him, like the Spotify decision, looked like it was a good position that he was in. The Everyday Struggle thing, that's the best thing he done for his career, leaving that. So I don't want to say all of his decisions were just like mad erratic and stupid, because a lot of his decisions have put in him really good spaces. But now I just don't know how long you can keep that up if people and the way you treat people isn't a big thing for you. Like, I always believe that the way you treat people, like, I've always been told manners takes you somewhere where money can't. And I believe it's so correct. Like, the way you treat people really can take you into way better positions than what you're in. And just look at Joe Budden's track history. He's always got an issue with somebody. He's always shouting at somebody, angry at somebody. But when he's on the other side, he's expecting people to respect his decisions. And Miles seems like a laid-back person. Like, put Rory to the side. Mal and Joe live together. They're literally like brothers at this point. So,
oh, they live together now?
They used to live together for years, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like, they're not just like, this is his friend, and if he can treat his friend like that, I understand why he can't hold a woman. I understand why the other aspects of his life isn't together, because he's just not good at relationships. Now, I don't want to speculate and say anybody has any issues or anything, but I do believe that Joe Budden might have some form of like an emotional.
Now there's people like that out there in the world who are that toxic that they can never build nothing or keep relationships going. There's a lot of people like that, and I feel like Joe Budden's one of them people. But in the podcast world, there's so many podcasts out there. There's so many people waiting that it's not back in the day. Like if I listen to a podcast and I like it, if anything goes wrong with that podcast, there's a million other ones that I can listen to. So I wouldn't even play around with the platform like that.
Okay, this is where I disagree a little bit. I'm not saying Joe Budden's the pinnacle. Yeah. However, Joe Budden comes with like a really rich history. So he's been in these rooms with these record labels. He's been in the rooms with these artists. So when he's giving his opinion on it, he can come with like stories, experience it. A lot of these new podcasters simply can't. Like also, somebody with such a big history, the fact that he's such a good public speaker, that is like two things that you rarely see. Like I see a lot of people talk, this is like a little bit of a, people might not agree with me on this, but if you listen to Drink Champs, Nori has got stories for days, but I struggle to listen to it because it just sounds like drunk uncles speaking in a room.
But why is that though, Danica? Because Drink Champs would be good. Drink Champs is good, but Nori cuts people off way too much. You can't mix liquor and conversation because he gets drunk and he cuts people off. You know how much times I've been watching that show and I get frustrated because
he has the best guests as
when
well.
Mayweather was on there, Mayweather talks, he's a robot, he talks rubbish 99% of the time. But for this show, when Mayweather was on Drink Champs, he was getting ready to open up and then Nori just cut him off. And then when he gave him back the mic, he forgot what he was going to say. And then the production is hard to listen to too because the room's so airy and all that. Make some noise. Too much people are in there. Yeah. Like, conversation. Like, if we was in here now doing this, but there was 10 people standing around, it's not going to be the same conversation. So when it comes to a podcast, I feel like there needs to be rules almost to doing it. And that's why I say that the Joe Budden one, yeah, the production was good. The setup was good. The content was decent. It was probably great to other people, but for what I like in a podcast, I didn't really was able to. When was it? What? It was when Nicki Minaj. No.
Right. Harlem Stop Swinging.
Yeah, it was when 6ix9ine was round the 6ix9ine situation.
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot of people were scared to say nothing about that because at the time there was a lot of shadow banning going on and stuff. So a lot of platforms weren't really speaking on it the way that it should have been spoken on. A lot of people were trying to stay, neutral on the topic. A lot of people weren't really saying what needed to be said. There were some people who said, there was either full on aggressive about him or full on trying to be his friend. So when Joe Budden's one popped up about 6ix9ine, I'm like, all right, I want to hear this now. And it was nothing but, coming off topic, laughing. There was no real breakdown of the topic.
Nah, you sound really serious when you say that.
Nah, but when it comes to certain topics, I understand that there's some things you can joke about. This is another balance that we had to get as well, right? There's a lot of things you can joke about, but some topics you literally can't joke about because I want to hear, and not just me, millions of people want to hear the reality behind certain topics. But with that podcast, I feel like there was a lot of jokiness. Now, I'm not saying he hasn't been in the rooms. Of course, he's been in the rooms, but there's something about his character that I just can't agree with. Like,
you know what you're saying, what you can't. That's what I love about him. I like this. Like, yeah. I like men who kind of like are different and they're proud of it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they have their own little quirks, they move their ways and they're set in their ways. I like the fact that when an issue happened, I could tell you what Joe Budden thinks. There's a lot of men out there, not men, people, who they're not themselves. They just act like how you think you're meant to act, what seems to be right. But Joe Budden, he's very much a character. He's so polarizing. You love him or you hate him. So I feel like that's where he's got it correct. Now, he's got a lot of ownership as well. He's messing around with the whole Joe Budden network. But I just don't know how much longer this can go on when people now know. I don't know how much longer this now can go on. Now people know that, he does something great for a couple of years, he finishes it. He does something great. You can't ever fall in love with something for him because he always ends it. Like, and I don't know, the two other guys he had on, I'm not too sure of their names, but like, they seem to be friends as well. But I wouldn't want them to get into a situation with him because in 5 years, when he does the exact same thing, everybody's going to look at them like the fool.
You gotta I just think with him, people just need to know that if you're a co-host going on there, you just need to know that you've got a window to use that window to catapult yourself to somewhere else.
100%.
That's it. But him as a person, he comes across toxic. People that can't keep relationships, whether it be romantic relationships, friendships, associates, people that can't, I say you really need to keep a close eye on people like that.
Yeah.
He's one of them people, but the podcast world is growing at a rapid rate, and now's not the time for your platform to be, people are out there. There were some people who used to say, I don't listen to podcasts, I don't listen to them. Now, at the minute, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, podcasts are the new radio. Like, it's the new, back in the day when I'm talking back in the black and white days, when people were jumping on horse and carriage and all that, when radios come in, it took a while for that to become a big thing. Then TVs come, a big thing, then cable come, satellites come. It takes a while. Podcasting might take another 5 years to really grow into itself, but there has to be a way of doing it. Spotify, it's all new to these companies. All these giving out money and stuff, it's all new. But imagine the person at Spotify now seeing what's going on. They're going to be like, we're glad we didn't, do the deal.
Because it's a train wreck.
That's what I'm saying.
It's just a big train wreck, and he's so unpredictable. Any contract I sign with, somebody would sign with Joe Budden, they'll probably have their heart in their stomach of nerves. That it just seems like everything's just so erratic with him. But yeah, I do have another topic that I do want to speak about. But I do enjoy talking about the whole podcasting industry because it is a really big industry and it's about to get so much more bigger, and like people really underestimate how hard it is. You said something in your message too, like when you was on the show, and it's so true. Some of these podcasts I listen in and I'm like, you like don't know how to hold a basic conversation, you don't know how to speak, you don't know. So me listening in, it feels like people are performing to me. They feel like they have to pretend to be all of this, because you have people on both sides of the spectrums. The people who clearly are they're just not good speakers, and the others who just try to perform for people and overdo it. But I do love podcasts, and truthfully, I do love the way the podcast scene is looking in the UK.
It's growing. It's growing at a rapid rate, and I'm glad we got a piece of the market as far as studio space for upcoming people as well. We're also going to be doing podcast workshops. Teaching up and coming podcasters the important steps to perfecting your podcast, and production is something that's very important, and we have been constantly messing around with our setup for years, trying to get it right. We never had no mentor, as I'm going to say that again. So. But now we know exactly what to do. We know exactly what you need, everything. And, you're seeing the quality change. And that's why when you started, you've started looking like this immediately. You haven't had to have the teething problems. Do you get what I mean? And I think that as a podcaster, you shouldn't have to worry about production.
Do you know what? I disagree A little bit,
Why?
and I know you're not going to agree with me.
Why?
I think sometimes with podcasts, so to a listening ear, unless like some of the podcast is coming out through the right ear of your headphone or stuff like that, sometimes people just having a little chin wag and having that in your headphones, especially people who listen to audio podcasts. I'm not talking about the people who just click on it casually on YouTube. I'm talking about people like me who go onto Apple Podcasts, they see something on Black, Bold and Bashy and they click it to see what it's about. You don't really care. You care about the audio, but you really care about just the chemistry between the people. So that's why I believe that you and Stephen really work, because you can tell that you really you're really good friends. You get on, but you get along with one another. Like, I was listening to one of your podcasts the other day, and I know you, and so Stephen was like, Mark, you've got that look on your face. And just like that little bit, I was laughing hard because I was like, we all know, like, if you watch Express Truth, we all know the look that Stephen's talking about.
Yeah.
But like, just that little things like that, you can see that used to really know each other. And that really brings in the audience. So whether Joe Budden, well, not just Joe Budden, but whether a podcast is literally speaking on a voice memo, which you can just listen to just low quality on your phone, I think you can draw people, your podcast listeners. Like, I think sometimes nowadays it's a little bit harder because people are so people really care about chemistry. It's a really big thing. So that's why I really like podcasts. I feel like I'm the third member of a friendship group when I listen to really. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Sorry. So nowadays it's a little bit harder because people have brought over podcasts into the YouTube world. So now footage is way more harder to get, because if you're looking at bad footage, you can't watch it. If you because you know what, at uni I got told the opposite.
Audio. There's been there was someone sent me a podcast and was like, listen to these podcasts. These people are good on the podcast, and they sent it over, and I clicked on it, and the quality of the audio was that poor that I couldn't listen to it. So even if they were saying something they could have been saying something that was 100% Bible facts, as we say, I couldn't listen to it because the presentation was wrong. So that's why I say, I can't listen to that. So I'm saying that I understand that. So with that being said, sound quality is very, very important.
It is.
See what I mean? So when you're doing a podcast, sound quality is very important. Now, like you said, everything's on YouTube. Visuals are important. And like, remember, even if you haven't got the means, because don't get it confused. I never always had the means to be able to buy equipment and look, my Mac, I say my Mac, but really it's Express Truth's Mac, fried this week. And we've got a few Macs, as you know, but the main Mac, the main brains of the podcast got fried this week. Now we're at a crossroads now. We don't pay production crew. We do everything ourselves. So we was at a crossroads. Do we buy a new Mac? What do we do? Do you see what I mean? Do we try and fix this Mac? Do we try and put another Mac as the brains of the podcast? And what happens if that gets fried? So what ended up happening? Yeah, thank God we've ordered another Mac now. Beautiful Mac, by the way. I'm actually really excited. I feel like a child on Christmas. But the Mac, that decision to take a few £1,000s now and bury it into that Mac, that's what separates the people that love this and the people that don't. Yeah, because I'll do it again, because that's how much we love doing the podcast. That we bury money, and don't get it confused. We get a lot of help, a lot of support from the people that listen. That they love it that much that we put out merch, they buy it. We get our Patreon, a good number of people sign up. Donations, super chats. If you look on our lives now, them things are growing constantly. So the money always comes back, but the passion and the same passion you've got, you've got the same passion. So it's just one of them, really.
It is really. It's a tough one. The politics behind podcast, it's hard to have politics behind it because you expect people just to be human on there. Like, do you know if there's politics behind Good Morning Britain? You know, they're not performing, but you know that they can't say certain things, otherwise they'll get fired. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But with podcast, it's so human based, like literally so natural that to have politics behind the scenes, it's hard. People expect it to be as natural behind the scenes as it is in front of the cameras, but that's not the reality of all the situations. Like, there is going to be situations where there's big deals offered, there is going to be disagreements, you can't, and then you're meant to go onto the show and try and act normal. But yeah, I'll write that subject up there. It is quite interesting. If you haven't really looked into it, look into it. It's got a lot, like, it's quite a interesting story all around. So if any of you like watched my latest video, I tried this whole new thing of doing little informative videos for people like my mom, for example, who don't have a clue what's going on social media, so she can watch it, and when I mention it on the show, people get where I'm coming from. You see what I'm doing there? You see what I'm doing? Anyway, so I'm going to be talking about the itsloz situation. So if you don't know what happened, Jay Huss's pregnant baby mother, currently that she's pregnant now, her friend accused her of being with her man for the past 3 months. Anyway, the man came out and said that's not true. And then the girl came out and said, well, it is true, and showed a picture of her and the man laid up. Well, the other people, not Loz. So I wanted to talk about this because I want to really stress about Girlcode. What is it? Is Girlcode a thing? Is there things that you're meant to stand by? Now, me, as a Receipts podcast would say, I'm definitely a girl's girl. I believe that if my friend's been there in any capacity, there's no way that you're meant to get involved in that. But I'm starting to believe that this new era of women, I should not say that, but a lot of women now, they don't have any form of morals. We're seeing it with the whole Porsche situation in America. And because I don't really watch Housewives, I can't come in here and attempt to break that down. But I still do want to talk about girls going out with their friends, ex-boyfriend, current boyfriend, any form of situation. Now, when you're friends with somebody, you often know the whole heartbreak, everything that they went through with this man, the whole situation, in and in, through and through. For you to go there behind your friend's back, it's kind of like you've got no morals, you can do anything. I actually believe that's a female, I shouldn't say female, a woman's version of a man snitching on his friend. So you just don't do them, like, you don't do them things. You definitely don't do them things, because Loz, she's an interesting girl, and do you know what? I believe a lot of these Instagram influencers, I can't tell you about their personality because I don't follow them, but I see her on the Shade Borough constantly. I just feel like the girl's pregnant, so everybody should leave her alone. Let her carry this child in peace. Why is there always drama around this girl? Leave her be. Leave her and her child alone. Another little aspect I did want to comment on is, don't you think it's really sad that this girl's a single pregnant woman? Like, how often do you hear about that? Mark, have you ever heard of the likes? A pregnant woman who's single? Unless
it's becoming more common. It's becoming more common, but yeah, it's terrible that... It's terrible. Yeah. Even when I don't follow them little girls really, but you know, you follow the blogs and you see it. And I seen she was having a baby shower with her one. I got a daughter, and I'm telling you the truth, I'll be heartbroken if that was the case. And I think that messages like that, you know, I hope it changes, because I don't want that to become a normal thing. Yeah. Baby shower with you one, in the sense of that the man ain't even around.
And the thing is, the man's got money, like he could be, not saying that he's got money so he could be, but a lot... the things that I don't get about these issues with these rappers and these baby mothers, imagine, I understand if you're broke and you can't be around because you're broke, you have nothing to offer, that's one thing. But imagine actually having money and the means to be there and you're still not there. That must be a different type of hurt. I am not built for it. I'm physically not built for it. These, like, not these girls, because I don't want to make it out like it's something that like it would never happen to me, because you know what? I should never say never, and nothing is never What would Kyrie say? Definite. I don't know the word. I just had a dumb moment, but let's not even go into that too much. Anyway, I'm not going to sit down and say that I'm above these girls because I wouldn't be a single baby mother because I don't know what is in the future for me. However, the fact that she's going through that alone, I believe all the sussy with girls claiming that she's going out with her man and all, just leave it out, don't mention it, because let her just give birth to this healthy child. She clearly has a lot of issues behind the scenes because her boyfriend, child's father, is currently wishing judge on somebody. So that's another story. Looking at it from the nyalondon girl, we need to stop claiming men that aren't ours. The sad thing about it is this man is absolute a-hole, yeah. He's not worth it. Imagine... So, if you don't know, she was saying how she's getting cheated on and all of this. And the man came out and said, wow, that's not my girl. I don't know what she's talking about. That must be heartbreaking. You can't be going out on social media really highlighting to the world that this is your man when you can't even post a picture of him. It's not your man, sis. Girls, I want everybody to understand. If he can't walk to this... I think Mark actually said it on one of my podcasts. If you can't go cinemas together, you can't go outside, you can't do anything, he only wants to be seen with you in the dark and inside. That's not your man, sis. Leave him alone. He's got a baby mother who's his girlfriend. He's got a wife at home and he's probably got kids at home too. Yeah, leave him alone. The girl's going through it. The girl is going through it. They're not like... And people are clowning her but I know a lot of girls have been through this. What you need to stop doing is putting expectations on these men. They're always going to disappoint you. They're going to disappoint you and make you feel away and one day go on Instagram and say that you're not in a relationship. Stop putting your heart into these men who are not putting their heart into you. You need to start moving with your head and not your heart, just like these men are, because it's just always going to end up in heartbreak. And in the whole situation, I've J Hus, itsloz, that nyalondon, and I believe the guy's called Dwayne Bawachi. The only people who are in a bad situation is the girls. The men have not took no form of accountability, yet the girls are arguing over these men. It doesn't make sense. And itsloz, where she went wrong, in my opinion, I would never talk down on a girl over men. If okay, let's play, not play as devil's advocate, but let's just say I was in a situation and my man's cheating on me with one girl. Whether the girl's my friend or not, I'm going to be mad at my man because my friend owes me loyalty, yes, but my man owes me loyalty. And Lars made it clear that they're not really friends. Your man owes you some form of loyalty. So we're not going to be coming onto social media, getting at this girl while she's pregnant, getting mad at her. Because she don't owe you nothing, sis. She doesn't. But the man does. So get mad at him and preferably get mad at him in the background. Because like I said in last week's episode, why is everybody airing out their bad news online? Every time girls take spun, the first thing they do is post a tweet, post to Snapchat, post to Instagram. Girls, really, do it in private. We didn't need to know that that's happened. And all that's happened now is that nyalondon she's been embarrassed. But Mark, I know you don't have any thoughts on that, but do you have any thoughts on Girlcode?
I said it a couple of shows ago. I says I never understood when people say you took my man, or such and such stole my man, or when a man says such and such stole my woman. A man or a woman is not a possession. They can't be stolen. That person wanted to go. And that's all I got to say. All that other stuff. And it's the Gen Z podcast, obviously. That's the kind of stuff that you're into. But I don't really know about these little girls. To me, they're just, they need to just look something, though. And that's all I can really say.
That is definitely facts.
That's all I can really say.
Because clearly they're bored. But you know what? Another thing that I never really understand, because I think another thing that I've never really understood is when girls use it as an insult, wow, I can take your man. If you can take my man, have him. If my man will jump to you to offend me, that's not a man I want to be with. We need to look at our set of morals and say, look, where do I stand in this? this is something that I will take, and this is something that I won't take. But yeah, I can't believe this show. I didn't anticipate this show to be this long. But yeah, that is the end of the show. So I'm gonna head over to my message 2 segment. So now my message 2 might be a little bit long this week. Not long, but it's to all these Nicki Minaj haters. So I'm going to actually start it from the beginning. If you didn't know, when I was a child, I was the biggest barb. I absolutely loved Nicki Minaj. My brother there, he used to always fill up my iPod with really just bare underground music. This was when Nicki Minaj was underground, so I was following her when she wasn't even with YMCMB at the time. It was literally just her just rapping in it. So I've always been a Nicki Minaj fan. Slowly fell off as I got older because, I don't worship any woman. But it was as bad as when I went to her concert, I literally shed tears. That's how much I love Nicki Minaj. So the last couple of months, weeks, I've just been feeling like I need to be feeling like an actual boss. So I've been listening to a lot of Nicki Minaj, these city girls and that. I do like them. I do enjoy to do a little 2-step to their songs, but I can never really listen to it and aspire to that, because I don't aspire to be taking men's money because of my looks. I don't aspire to be Birkined out. That's not my aspirations. Whereas Nicki Minaj, even though sometimes I'm literally walking around Amazon, she makes me feel like the baddest girl in the room whilst I'm doing so. So I'm not sure what day it was. I believe it was Thursday. No, it was Friday. Friday morning, Nicki Minaj dropped Beam Me Up, Scotty. And people have only just started to give her the recognition that she deserves. I'm hearing people constantly, they'll be like, Cardi B is better. Oh my gosh, Megan Thee Stallion will wrap circles around Nicki Minaj. No, there's a reason why Nicki Minaj is where she is. Before she started to do the whole Anaconda thing, listen to the Monsterverse. She could out-rap men and women too. She's good at her craft. Now it's cool to like her again. I see a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon. But I just want to say, my message too is to say that I didn't forget when you were trying to say the girl, you know what, I don't even like to talk down on other women, so I'm not even going to say it. But when you were making out the other woman was way better than her, because it's just not the truth. Nicki Minaj will wrap circles around every last one of these women. And do you know what? I do understand when people are like, yeah, but Rhapsody, but Remy Ma. Nicki Minaj has got all the aspects of being great. She's got star appeal. She's good at what she does. She's pretty. I shouldn't say that. You shouldn't be good because you're pretty, but that helps. But yeah, I believe that Nicki Minaj has got all the aspects and she does it well, and there's a reason why she's been in the industry so long. Remy Ma, yeah, she can say R to the easy, M to the yeah, it's catchy. But what is she doing now? Name her biggest song. It was years ago, innit? It was years ago. So that's what my message to is. I have to have a little stand moment because she really made my Friday. Nicki Minaj really made my Friday. I went into my mum's room and I was like, Mummy, Nicki Minaj has dropped Beam Me Up, Scotty, because I was over listening to it on YouTube. When I'm in the gym, I don't want to be listening to it on YouTube. Anyway, that's besides the point. I've just really showed myself there and getting excited for Nicki Minaj. But yeah, that is the end of this week's show. I hope you liked it. Remember, please, everybody, stay subscribing. Remember to tell a friend about the GenZ podcast. Share it. Everybody follow my website, www.tanikatamzin.com, where all content shared by me is there. Is there anything else that I normally say? Yeah, and that's everything. Bye.